am very excited to introduce my colleague, Robin Wilson, who actually recently joined us as the Chief of Staff here at CodePath, and she will be our moderator for this session. Robin?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Emily. I'm so excited to be here and so thrilled to have joined the CodePath team. I spent most of my career working in the tech sector, helping to scale startups, and really saw sort of firsthand the challenges around diversity and equity in the space. And so was really thrilled to connect with Michael and the team and to meet all of you, some of you I've already connected with, and supporting big changes in the sector. And so today I'm thrilled to be here with Nick Caldwell, who is so amazing, and talk through Nick's background, his career path, and answer some of your questions. And so to share a little context, Nick has a fantastic career. He graduated from MIT with a degree in computer science, and then he went on to work at Microsoft, where he spent quite a few years rising through the ranks and went on to become the general manager for Power BI, which was their preeminent business intelligence tool. And from there, he's gone on to become the vice president of engineering at Reddit, the chief product and engineering officer at a company called Looker, which was acquired by Google. Nick was on the team through that experience, moved on to Google, and then most recently joined Twitter as their vice president of engineering. So quite the amazing career, and looking forward to hearing a bit more, Nick, about what got you excited about tech in the first place. A lot of our students here today are hoping to build their own career like one that you've had. So I'd love to kind of hear about your exposure and what brought you into the space.
Yeah, sure. So thanks, Robin. And thanks to everybody for coming out to listen to me rant at you for an hour. I'm looking forward to it. Really an honor for me to be able to hopefully inspire you and give you some tips. So don't be shy. Later on, we have the Q&A. So I wonder how I got into tech. I mean, I got into it pretty early in life. My dad was a public defender, and he used to do all of his casework on a typewriter. If you guys, maybe folks on the call haven't even seen a typewriter before, but these used to exist. One day he brought home a Tandy 1000 to replace his typewriter. This is like a super old computer running MS-DOS 2.0 and 640 kilobytes of RAM. And I was at the age of 2 or 3, and I used to sit on his lap and watch him, do his casework on there. And then later on, when I was about the age of 10, he bought me a book called Learn C++ in 12 Easy Lessons, which was a total lie. But I fell in love with coding from my first Hello World program. And the cool thing about that was I started to code games. I used to make games for kind of bulletin board systems, early internet things where people could dial in and meet people from around the world. And I grew up in PG County, Maryland, which is a 90% Black suburb outside of DC. Suddenly I had access to people from across the country, across the planet. And, from then on, I realized that, hey, like opportunities, although talent is evenly distributed, opportunity is not. And I saw this sort of internet and learning how to code as a way to get access to many, many more opportunities than somebody from PGC, 1 second. So that's how I got into it. Learn how to play video games, learn how to code video games, use that knowledge to get into a high school that was in a different area. And then from then springboarded into MIT. And, I could keep going, but I don't want to spend the next 30 minutes talking about my whole career trajectory.
Were there a couple of key turning points in your life that really helped to kind of shape this career path for you?
There were several. I mean, like when I was in, obviously being given the opportunity to go to MIT and learn from that institute was pretty amazing. It was difficult to achieve that. I had to give up quite a bit. So I'm sort of glossing over the fact that when I decided to learn how to code, I dropped all my other hobbies and did nothing but learn how to code. I used to have other skills. It's amazing to think about what my life would have been, but I oriented everything toward code. At MIT, I learned how to really survive anything. I can't say that the education itself was worth what I paid for it, but it does teach you how to learn. You learn how to learn anything, and you build up kind of a large amount of self-confidence in terms of taking on any challenge, which I then carried into work. My first job was at Microsoft, and the next big turning point I would say I had in that career was the moment I kind of decided that rather than being passive in my career, I was going to take a more proactive, become more of a leader. And I was in my manager's office complaining about, you guys are all students, so you haven't experienced this yet, but if you're an engineer, at some point, I guarantee you're going to get in conflict with your product manager, and you're going to be saying the PMs don't know what the fuck they're doing. Why do I, as an engineer, have to listen to them and build anything that they say? And I was doing this because, it was about 4 or 5 years in my career, and I'm just in my manager's office complaining. And he said, Nick, you're a great manager or a great engineer, but you suck as a leader, which hurt because it was coming from someone I respected. And he said, leaders take responsibility for what happens next. So are you going to stay in my office complaining about this PM, or are you going to do something about it? And it was this moment literally was like the fundamental changing. It changed everything about how I approach work. So I left his office. I went to the office of the general manager at the time, and I said, hey, look, I don't agree with the product strategy, but I want to be part of the solution. And if you give me an opportunity, I will help build a roadmap that will make this business successful for the next couple of years. And I don't know how I phrased it, but the guy actually gave me a shot, and it was the beginning of my upward career trajectory. Fast forward, I started to take bigger and bigger bets in my career. I got to work on a project with Bill Gates, who was a personal hero of mine. He's really salty, by the way. Like, if you look at him on the internet, like he's this grandfatherly guy who just runs around raining money on people. He's a pretty salty guy. Great experience though. And decided to get an MBA. I think like the way to characterize my career is every time I start to get comfortable, I just look for something even more difficult to do. And, this could just be my personality, but it certainly has kept me on my toes, kept me learning and being given access to lots and lots of opportunities. I stayed at Microsoft probably way too long. I was there for 15 years. I had a great career. But part of me staying there, if I'm honest, it was fear of trying something different. I come from PGC, didn't really have a huge income when I was growing up. When I got that Microsoft job, it was, making 6 figures, and my parents were like, oh my God, son's rich. So I got into the mindset that like, taking risks, or trying to do something different, I might lose all of that I had built up. The reality though, and y'all should learn this as quick as you can, like once you're in tech, your knowledge, skills, and abilities give you a fairly large safety net. Like tech is the fastest growing set of opportunities on earth. As long as you're good at your job, careful with how you develop your network, you will always be able to find work. And it took me far too long to realize that, and I missed opportunities and didn't bet on myself at times when I should have. Now, lately, once I realized that, I left Microsoft. And I'm not saying Microsoft's a bad place. It's just I started to realize that if I looked outward, there would be even more opportunities. And I ended up finding a great job as the VP of engineering at Reddit. I learned so much in the couple of years I was there. Didn't want to get stuck doing one thing because I started to get comfortable again. And chief product officer role at Looker came on, and jumped on that. We got acquired by Google, started to feel comfortable again. And now I've jumped over to Twitter, and Twitter is kind of insane. It's going to take me a while to get a handle on this job. So, okay, I'll stop, Robin. I think I may have over-answered that question.
No, that is awesome. And I think you kind of led into a question that I had as well, which is, hearing your perspective on sort of early on, being a little bit risk averse, knowing you came from a background where there wasn't a lot of money, and so opting into kind of, what the safe path is. And then now kind of taking more risks. When you kind of look back, would you have done anything differently? Or would you really have sort of stayed the same course?
No, I mean, I think there's maybe a couple things I would have done differently. The first is I would have started to take risks earlier. And by that is to say, I spent my first team I joined at Microsoft, I stayed on it for about 7 or 8 years. And then I switched teams to go into the BI organization. That was a big step up. I started to, my career really started to move rapidly once I made that shift. It was a mental mindset that, like, rather than being dependent on my manager or that particular organization, I was going to take charge of my own career. So the thing I would have told myself earlier is your manager doesn't manage your career. Like, you manage your career. All right. And I think when you're young, you don't quite understand this. You think, like, you come out of college, which is basically taking care of you and giving you housing and food, and you go into the workplace and you think, well, it's the equivalent. It's not. Managers aren't there to manage your career. You should start managing your career. And if I had known that earlier and been comfortable with risk, I think I could have taken advantage of some of these opportunities sooner. The other thing I would say to a younger version of me is, your network actually matters more than code over time. And when I was very young, I thought, like, coding was everything. Like, so I spent all my time just, trying to make games and learn new tech. That's actually important. You have to be able to produce good work. But the thing that I've learned, which you guys will probably learn within the next 5 years, technology changes incredibly quickly. There's probably been a new 2 or 3 new JavaScript frameworks released while I've been talking. But the thing that doesn't change is your network and the relationships you build. So your code, the things that you ship and check in, those are actually depreciating assets. Like, over time, they'll go away. They're expected to be replaced. But your network is an appreciating asset. Like, there's people on this call right now listening to me who will be, like, directors and VPs, like, within 10 years even, right? So the fact that you're on this call with them gives you an opportunity to know someone who could potentially give you further opportunities later on. So start to invest in your network early. I think the other thing, I could go on for quite a bit. Like, Robin, I don't want to eat up all the time. Okay,
no,
so
please.
okay, so just a couple other things. When I was coming up, it was very, I'm talking about going to MIT from PG County, then going to Microsoft, which is in Seattle. I was, as a Black engineer, very isolated, and I got into my mind, like, hey, I don't know what we're going to do about this isolation, because it's not like there's going to be a whole bunch of other Black people coming up, so I'd better just, like, hunker down and, like, power through it. And I think for my generation, maybe that was the only way you could kind of get through it. But for the current generation, there's just enough of us that you guys can help each other out. The only way that we are going to win in this battle is if we network and find a way to help one another. So I would encourage you guys to, you can give back sooner than you think. I don't know how to express this exactly, but as soon as you think you know something, like, turn back around and share it with someone who's coming up behind you. And if all of us do this, we'll very quickly be much better off. And it took me way too far into my career to start turning around and just helping people out with what I know. It's part of why I'm on this call with y'all today. And I still see people from my generation, or maybe the generation that came before me, who have not figured this out yet. So I don't want y'all to follow in that same pattern. Try and be the most collaborative, helpful generation you can be. Okay, I'll stop there.
No, you're making great segues, because one of the next questions is really, sharing advice that you give to the Black community about dealing with racism, particularly in the tech sector and in the workplace.
Well, okay, I'm not the person to solve racism, but I think in terms of dealing with it, I think there's, I'll just give you my experience. Like, I'll give you kind of I'm not usually this egotistical, y'all. I'm just saying this to make a point. But I have built in the last 5 years the two most influential BI products on planet Earth. Like, I am personally responsible for running those teams. People still call me a token black dude. It's like, what do you have to do? Like, what do you have to do? So I think one thing that y'all should, particularly, people of color on the call, if you let this kind of get at you, you will go crazy. You have to build a somewhat of a thick skin, because the challenges associated with diversity and inclusion in tech will still take some time to fix, despite how much energy and success I think we've had recently. This is still a very broad systemic challenge. So the thing that I would encourage you guys is lean on each other for support. If your company doesn't have an employee resource group or critical mass of other Black people to work with, you can go to external organizations like DevColor. I'm a board member for DevColor, so I'm a little bit biased, but you've got to find your community somewhere. And what's nice is that recently there are organizations like DevColor, or employee resource groups where you can find other people like you. It is, for me, it's been like sort of a refuge. And if ever I feel like I need a place to go vent, it's good to know that I can get on the DevColor Slack and just like unload. But you've got to find your community somewhere, and one, and then two, be patient, and then three, try and find ways to help each other. Like, those are the ways I think you should contribute. I guess finally, don't be afraid, particularly in the current environment, to hold your leaders accountable. Like, you guys are students and coming up in your career. It's actually not your job to be fixing these problems. And I also see companies who think it is. Like, they'll form like employee resource group, but then demand that like brand new employees fund and run it in their spare time, I guess. Like, this is sort of dysfunctional. So try and hold your leaders accountable to being supportive of these efforts, instead of pawning it off on you or people who don't have real authority. And now we're in an environment where you can be quite successful holding people accountable. I think 5 years ago, I wouldn't have made that claim, but certainly in the environment we're in now, there's a lot of attention to diversity in tech. People want the opportunities that are afforded in tech to be more equitably available. And increasingly, leadership and executives are being held accountable, not just in a feel-good way, but like they're being directly required to address these issues. So don't be afraid to speak up and ask for what you need. Okay, I'll stop there, Robin.
No, it's a great answer. And I mean, it brings up another question for me, which is sort of the point that you made, which is like, there's a lot of resources, or there's more resources now for people of color in tech. And there's certainly employee resource groups, but I think earlier on in your career, that wasn't the case. So one question is just sort of like, how did you cope and how did you find your community? And then relatedly, kind of how, given kind of the role that you were mentioning of sort of being the token Black person, how do you juggle kind of that responsibility, or that, that burden that people put on you as representing for people of color, versus being Nick, who's an amazing technical leader and an individual unto himself?
Let's say you asked two extremely complicated questions. Wait, so what was the first part of that question? Let me see if I can hit that first.
So the first part was, there's a lot more resources now, and there's a lot more focus now on supporting people of color breaking into tech. But earlier on, how did you find your community?
Yeah.
How did you find your people and that support?
I mean, to be honest, early on, I didn't. I mean, I just had to tough it out. So I was an engineer in Seattle. I didn't see another black tech exec at all when I was in Seattle, like, period. Like, so I was at Microsoft for 15 years. I was the only Black engineering executive I saw, period, end of story. So there was no community to be found. that was what was frustrating about it. And I don't think we didn't really have the same, uh, yeah, we're going back in time, so I don't want to frustrate you guys. At that time, we didn't really have the same sort of resources that we have available today. And I just sort of toughed it out, which I don't think was healthy, to be honest. Um, and so that's why I'm telling you guys, don't do what I did. Like, I just like powered through it. When I first got to, we moved to San Francisco about 3.5 years ago. And one of the first organizations I encountered was Dev Color. I got invited to one of their kickoff events. And it was the first time that I had, I mean, literally 300 other Black people in a room, entry level all the way up to exec level. And it was mind-blowingly transformative to me. So this was, again, this is fairly recent in my career history. And once I knew that there was an opportunity to have that sort of connection, my my behavior and activities radically shifted. I mean, it was very transformative to me. I joined Dev Color. I participated in many of the squad events, and I got so involved in the community that they eventually asked me to be on the board. And you know, so it's my community now. I think when I was coming up, though, it was much more about like hunker down, power through, because I didn't see any way to get to that community from where I was at. And now that I'm part of Dev Color, we're building a chapter in Seattle. We're building a chapter in Atlanta and New York, so that people don't have to go through the same sort of feeling of isolation that I did. Like, even if their local company doesn't have enough folks to do an ERG, they can join Dev Color and get it that way. So, okay, what was the second part of that one?
And then the second one was, your point earlier of sort of being, references the token Black man in professional situations despite your accomplishments. And so wondering how you balance that, the challenge of sort of managing representation in those rooms where people of color are still few. Hopefully that's changing, but kind of balancing that with your own personal identity and accomplishments and career.
I think one thing about me that people pick up on pretty quickly is that I don't really shy to hide my own personality. So I'm a pretty unique sort of person, but part of that uniqueness includes, like, I genuinely believe I need to help. Well, I like to help all people, but like, I have specific affinity for helping underrepresented folks, because the journey that I went through was very challenging. And I have learned ways in which it could be better and easier for the next generation. So if people are going to tokenize me or say what they want to say about me, it doesn't bother me. Like, I look at my place in life as an opportunity to help the next generation. And it's easy for me to say. I mean, I've already been through all the difficult hurdles. But the way I look at it is, now I'm in just an opportunity to help other people is my guiding principle, in a way that it honestly wasn't necessarily even like five years ago. So, say what you're going to say. I've already made it, and I'm gonna help the next generation get there even faster.
That's awesome. And I think that very nicely leads to my next question, which is, you kind of pointed out that you have, when you've gotten comfortable in your career, you've kind of pushed yourself and gone on to new roles and explored new opportunities. And I'm curious, given sort of the challenges that Twitter, faces daily in the headlines in terms of the content on their site, and then, with your experiences at Reddit, which has also had some challenges in terms of community management and in terms of, racism. And so I was just curious, those seem like particularly like thorny companies for you to venture into. And so would love to kind of hear your perspective and your thought process on taking on these roles in these organizations.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I joined them, I didn't think about those opportunities from the perspective of racism necessarily. I think the way I think about Reddit and Twitter, there's some similarities. It's that the way in which we communicate with each other as a society is rapidly changing. Like, the way that we share information, we're all not like sitting huddled around radios or TVs nowadays to get our information. It's all happening much, much more quickly, and it's all tied together with social media. So the way that I look at like Reddit and Twitter is that they reflect a new way for humanity to share events and talk about the world, and it's much, much more real time, and it also gives everyone potential to amplify their own voice, which sounds cool on the one hand, but on the other hand, if you think through the consequences of that, it needs to be managed very, very carefully. So I looked at the challenges of Twitter and Reddit as like, I wanted to be on the forefront of something that was transforming humanity, and I in a way that could go either very well or could go poorly, and I wanted to be a part of that. I think insofar as like either of these platforms deal with like racism and hate speech, it's been a challenge. I think Twitter has been at the forefront of tackling these issues lately. I'm pretty, I don't want to toot our horn because this is a tough problem, but part of the reason I joined Twitter was the relatively firm and progressive stance that they're taking on combating online hate speech and racism. Reddit was an interesting experience. It's the entire exec team there wanted to move quickly on those sorts of issues, but I think you can only move as fast as the underlying platform will allow you. So some of those changes that I wanted to make, or the rest of the exec team also wanted to make during the time frame I was there, are only now rolling out like several years later. I think with Twitter, they've had to be more quick about it because of the growing influence and impact that the platform is having on the world. I like to be a part of that. I think we're headed directionally the right way, but figuring out the right way to make the power of that platform available to all of humanity also requires us to understand humanity, and it's a tough challenge. So I'm glad to be a part of it.
That's great to hear. And I think this sort of goes into, how do you think about failure? It's something we all deal with, but, in your own career, it sounds like you've kind of pushed through a lot of challenging situations. And do you have advice for students who are starting out and sort of like how to confront failure, how to deal with it?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've got to build up. So just to be clear, like you or your project, or you will encounter failure in your career. It's better if you don't fail. It's better if you can manage to not fail. Like don't. I do meet people in Silicon Valley where they've got this mantra. It's like fail fast. Don't fail at all is a better, like, don't aim for failure. That's like, I don't know why people say this fail fast thing. Don't aim for failure, aim for success. But secondarily, like, you do have to overcome a fear-based mentality. Like, you should always ask yourself, what decision would I make if I were not afraid of failing? And I always ask myself that. It helps me put fear aside and make the best decision for me, the company, or whoever. Now, it would be very dishonest of me to say that I have always had this mentality. Like, you have to get to a certain level of self-confidence or in your own abilities to just be like, oh yeah, I'm not going to worry about fear, right? That takes a long time to develop. It took me a long time. So the honest answer is, like, I do want y'all to overcome a fear-based mentality. It takes time. It took me, I would say, 8 years into my career before I felt that my own knowledge, skills, ability, and network would allow me to take the sort of risks that I really wanted to. So you don't have to feel like, do what I'm saying overnight. It's going to take a while for you to get there, and that's okay. But in the long run, if you can overcome your fear, you will unlock lots of opportunities. And the more good opportunities you have at your disposal, the faster you can climb your career and achieve whatever goals you want to set out for.
So for our students who are currently in school, some of their computer science programs may not be the best. They're working other jobs. Do you have advice for students who are in kind of that scarcity mindset, that fear mindset, but they see that there are things that they can do or improvements that need to be made? Do you have advice for someone who's like not quite on the other side of that fear, but sees the need for improvement in order to make their own life circumstances better?
I mean, in terms of like tech skills, I think you started this question with asking more about like tech skills. I think that one's pretty straightforward. I mean, I went to MIT. I think I used like one class out of that whole experience. So if your college doesn't have a great CS program, I learned most of my CS skills were actually learned either on the job or even back when I was coming, it was online even then. Like, so I wouldn't per se worry so much about your college not having great courses. In terms of things to do to give yourself that mindset, that's going to be different for every person. And for me, to be honest, like I think, to be totally transparent with you guys, like having a certain amount of money was what what opened this up for me. I was like, well, I think this is around the time I became like a staff engineer at Microsoft, and I won't say how much I was making then, but it was like mentally I had gotten to this place where, well, what's the worst that can happen, right? And I know it doesn't sound like this bold, hard charging. Like if you talk to me now, I sound like I could go slay dragons or whatever. But like back then, it takes a while, right? It takes a while to build up that confidence. And for me, I was like, I don't want to risk my paycheck. And then I did risk it, and everything turned out fine. And then I risked it again, and I had a bad experience, but it still turned out fine. It's like everyone's going to have kind of a trigger that gets them into this different mindset. For me, it was a combination of I didn't want to, like my family, we didn't have a lot of money. I didn't want to lose what I had earned. And then two, self-confidence, like getting out there, taking risk, being my authentic self. I didn't understand like the unique value that I could bring to the world. And once I started doing that, and opportunities started coming my way, I started to get more self-confident. So, I know that's not a clearly articulated answer, but it's going to be different for everybody.
I think it's a great point, because I think there's also a lot of pressure or a lot of sort of mystique about being a founder. And I think that can often feel really challenging. You have a computer science degree, you have a family to support, or you don't come from a lot of money. And so I kind of, for somebody who's looking to graduate, and thinking about career prospects, do you have advice or perspective on, for example, going to graduate school versus going to work at a big tech company versus kind of trying to go that entrepreneur route, which is, the one that gets a lot of the attention, particularly in the Bay Area?
Well, those are all wildly different career paths. I mean, I can give you very quickly, a master's degree or a doctoral degree, look, if you're really academic, you should do that. It will not help you in any way at all, unless there's maybe certain types of jobs where that might be beneficial, but like, only go that route if you're very, very academic minded and have a particular narrow focus that you want to learn more about. If you're passionate about it, go for it. But in terms of like your full-time career track, I don't think that would be the best way to spend your time. You learn the most, just by just getting a job. Big company versus entrepreneurship. If you can get a Google or a Microsoft job straight out of the bat, go for it. But I think most people, like getting into tech is the thing, right? There's lots of great small companies out there. Like when I joined Microsoft, Google was still a startup. And part of the reason I, I used to make fun of my friends who were going to Google. I was like, you're taking on way too much risk. That would have been not in retrospect, that probably was incorrect assessment. So you learn different things at big companies versus small companies. Big companies are going to have more stability with more structure. I definitely got a great management education at Microsoft. Small companies are scrappier. You're going to be learning newer technologies, and you're going to have more freedom in terms of what you do. You're probably going to own a larger proportion of the business. If you have to ask my advice, I thought working at a big company out of the gate prepped me really well to work at smaller companies later, because I can teach them quite a bit. But that's just my opinion on it. And then, going an entrepreneurial route is also great. I also do a lot of angel investing. So I see people coming out of college and going straight into entrepreneurship. I think I would caution folks who want to do that. It's, you come out of college, you have a lot of, energy and excitement, and enthusiasm. It's great to pair that with some real world skill before you go try and build a whole business. So I would say maybe take a little time to get some real world experience, learn how sales, marketing, other functions work before you go start your own business. Someone asked me about getting an MBA. I did that. It was something that was valuable to me because it helped me overcome some of the fears that I had that were holding me back from the next stage in my career. This is around the time I left Microsoft and started to take on other roles. The MBA for me allowed me to understand that, I didn't have to limit my career trajectory to the job ladder that had been laid out to me at Microsoft, that there were many ways in which I could build businesses or run my own career. And it was useful for me to break out of a mindset that I had previously held for 15 years. But if you can build that mindset with less time and expense, I would encourage you to do that, because it took me 3 years to get that MBA. Okay, I'll stop there.
No, that's great. And I think, so there's sort of a follow-up, which is that for someone who does want to go kind of straight into entrepreneurship, would you recommend, I think, trying to work on a business skill set either as part of the undergraduate experience, or potentially pursuing that master's and getting that education before sort of charting your own course?
If you want to go entrepreneurship, you should take as many business related sorts of skills as you can as an undergrad, particularly in the realm of communication. But no, what I'm saying is you probably need actual real world experience. Like there's no degree program I'm aware of that will really give you what you need to know, how to understand how to work with marketing, or how to really work with sales and build a pipeline, how R&D's roadmap needs to funnel into sales, and how they need to work together. These are things that you can only learn either by just jumping into it and doing it, or by being a part of a company where you can observe. But university education is it's a little on the more theoretical side, and particularly as pertains to technology, can be a little bit outdated. So you want to make sure you pick up some of those skills from real world on the job insights, and not to insult anyone's degree program. I'm not saying don't go to college. College is great. Stay in school, kids.
No, and that's why CodePath really exists, is to try to augment that university experience with real world, industry and curriculum. And so that's our mission, is really bridging that gap so people get that great experience while there's an exposure while they're still in school. Kind of relatedly, so you have this amazing education from MIT, and I'd imagine you had a lot of career prospects. So for folks who are going to get a computer science degree from a less well-known university, do you have perspective or advice on how to kind of go about getting that first job?
I think nowadays, if you have a well-known degree, great. But nowadays, companies I've been, we're actually not really looking at, again, don't take this the wrong way. The trend is more toward looking at boot camps and people who actually have demonstrated skill. The trend is that way, right? So I'm not saying that every company will be doing this, but the trend on the whole is like, hey, if you can demonstrate skill, that is going to be the thing that we use as the criteria, as opposed to a 4-year degree program. In terms of how you land that job, I wish I had done this sooner, but like you really need to build your brand on, your LinkedIn profile is like min bar. But think about, your recruiter is going to look at your LinkedIn profile, your Twitter feed, your Instagram, and maybe your GitHub, probably in that order. And how do you show up on each of those platforms? Do you present to the outside world like someone who would be an awesome employee, super interested in tech? Like, spending a little bit of time on that every week will add up over time and, make your brand stand out. So in my day, it was like, go write blogs. Nowadays, I don't know what kids do. Make a TikTok about tech. I don't know what kids do now. Whatever you guys do, but try and get what your thoughts and ideas and what you've learned out into the world. Do they really look at Twitter and Instagram? Yes. Twitter is by far the best way. Yeah, you guys are already answering my questions. Twitter, yes, people look at Twitter for sure. They for sure will look at those things. Sorry, Robin, I got distracted by the chat and I forgot the rest of the question.
Oh, no, it's great. And it sounds like kind of what you're saying too, to bridge to earlier, is like both be very mindful of your sort of passive online presence. So all the places that people can go and look you up, and then at the same time, really work to build out your community and your network so that you can meet those people and get in the door at those companies.
Yeah. And also, I would also say practice interviewing a lot. So one other thing you can do to get armed is learn how companies will use different strategies to interview. Like if you interview at Google, it's going to be very different than if you interview at Twitter or a startup. You can learn all that stuff up front, and it'll make you less frustrated as you go down the interview process. Because I see a lot of people getting frustrated with that. Like, I did a Google interview, but I didn't realize they were going to have whiteboard coding exercises. I mean, this is the thing you can predict. So try and get as much of a heads up about how that process works, either online or just by talking to people who work there. Generally this information is out there, and you want to be as prepped as you can. Also, like, don't be afraid to do a couple interviews. Practice interviewing a lot. It's a skill. If you don't, real talk, like I've probably failed about 50. I'm about 50-50 for interviews, and I'm doing okay. Okay. So, feel free to whiff a few of them. It's not the end of the world. Right?
Even without that business TikTok. Nick, this has been amazing. I'm actually going to kick it to Emily, who's been deep in the comments, so that we can pull out some of those questions.
Yes, hi. So as you can see, lots of questions and comments in the chat. We also have a group of students who have started their own Google Doc to exchange LinkedIn profiles with one another. So super fun there. I'm going to ask one question, and then I know some are chomping at the bits to go off mute. So let me throw this one question over. So from Akshay, apologies if I mispronounce your name, had a question, which was, do you think we should change teams or companies when we start getting comfortable in our current position? I know, Nick, you talked a lot about that in your personal experience. Is that the advice that you would give to our students?
Again, it's not broad advice, but generally speaking, if you switch teams, you're going to get new skills. It's going to expand your capabilities. So my general answer is yes. But if you're something you really love, I mean, this is all a balance. If you find yourself in a product that you really love or a team that you really love, it's okay to stay there. But in terms of like how you maximize your career growth, the broader sets of experiences, not just in tech, but like people you work with that you have, the broader sets of experiences, the more opportunities will come your way and the more you can accomplish. So for me, I stayed in the same team for 7 years doing natural language processing. I then switched into business intelligence. I then, like 6 or 8 months after that, got into running cloud services. Then 3 months after that, mobile. And then it kind of snowballed from there. I think like 2 years after that, I was running like a design team and all sorts of stuff. So in my career, I've run engineering, product design, IT, security, product marketing, some other random stuff. So the fact that I have all of this underneath my belt means that I have quite a bit of opportunity that I can now do in my career. And I got that by trying different things, right? Trying different things. So again, it depends on what you want to do, though. I also know people have been quite successful staying in one particular area. This is a very personal question.
Thank you. Okay, students. Anybody want to go off mute and ask your question directly?
Yeah, can I go ask a question?
Sure. Go ahead, Joseph.
Okay. Hi, my name's Joseph. I guess a little bit about me. I'm a student at UIUC studying computer science. I'm a rising senior. Sorry for that noise in the background. I'm a little concerned that I shouldn't do engineering because at some of the companies I've worked at in the past, I felt like super siloed when I was an engineer and didn't get any exposure to product. But I've talked to a lot of PMs and I feel like I don't want to get to the point where I lack the engineering knowledge to be able to build products. And ultimately, I want to be a successful startup founder. I'm not sure whether the better career trajectory is to start with product or to start with engineering.
You can, the answer is you can go either way. If you know you want to be a founder someday, like you will eventually be asked, do you want to be the product founder or the technical co-founder? In either case, most companies, when they start out, are so small that both the product and the technical co-founder need to have some business sense, like some understanding of sales, marketing, how to build pipeline, et cetera. So you can, at this stage in your career, it doesn't matter a whole lot. You can honestly like just get into tech and start learning. But you need to find a way to get exposure to those other disciplines if you know you want to be a founder. And you can learn that from either place. It's generally easier to learn it from product because you're more directly required to interface with sales, marketing, legal, and the other functions. In engineering, as you said, you can let yourself be siloed, but it's also fairly easy to carve out time to go and pick up those other skills. So for me at Microsoft, I was purely an engineer for the first 10 years of my career, but I also carved out plenty of time to spend with sales and marketing and legal once I thought it was important. This maybe took a little bit too long because I didn't realize how important it was. If you realize it on day one, you will find the time to carve out. Product versus engineering at this stage in your career, it's not as heavy of a decision as you might think. Just make sure that you start to get those holistic abilities as soon as you get your job. And then a couple of years from now, when you want to go become a founder, it will pay off.
And how do you make sure that you don't lose technical skills being in product? Because sometimes when you're in product, since you're focused on so many things, it's easy to not really know what a specific piece of the code is doing or not really know how a framework works. And is there any tips you have to maintain those technical skills?
In product, the tips would be the same tips I would give any manager, which is you can read and do coding exercises on the side. In product, though, that's not your job. So if you switch to product and unless you're like running a developer product, like an API product or something developer oriented, generally not your responsibility to have that level of technical detail. An analogy that I often use is think about like a restaurant. If you're in a restaurant, the product people are like the waiters. They're going out into the in talking to customers and figuring out what they want to eat and how it should be seasoned, and they're bringing those orders back to the kitchen. But they're not telling the chefs how to cook, right? And that's an analogy, or I don't know if it's the best one, but with product, think more about the customer and interpreting their needs and articulating that very well to the engineering team. But if I am, if I see a PM diving down to code level details with an engineer, that's usually a red flag. I mean, it's cool that you can do it, but it's usually an indicator of something being off in the roles and responsibilities.
Thank you for your answer. It was really helpful.
Hey, man, good luck out there.
Appreciate it.
All right, Fazwa, you're next.
Okay, so hi Nick, I'm a big fan of you. I've watched most of your talks and read many of your articles, and usually you encourage like URMs to consider pursuing the executive track, or at least just think about it, right? And you've almost sold me, you really have. But I wanted to know, is it possible to have a semblance of a work-life balance? And if it is, how do you balance personal life and work as an executive specifically?
Oof. Trying to think if I should give you all the real answer. Is it possible to have a semblance of a work-life balance and be an executive? I don't think so. I mean, if we're being honest, I think you can, once you're an exec, it's kind of like I'm telling y'all it's important to break into startups, and you're going to work really hard to break in. Once you're in, you're in. You have a certain level of comfort. Trying to break into the executive ranks, I don't think there's an easy way to do that. Like, you're going to have to bust your ass, network, prove your worth. But once you're in, it's a different story. And I think that's the difference. Like, if I wanted to, so my last job was at Google, right? So I was an exec at Google running, Looker got acquired. That definitely could have had great work-life balance in that job. But to get it was go build a company and get it acquired. All right. So, I think to get there, you're going to have to work really hard and trade off work-life balance. And I think for every person, that's sort of an individual type of decision, how much they want to make that trade-off. I think where people get into trouble is if that decision is not being made by you, if it's like your manager telling you you've got to work like 14-hour days, that's dysfunctional. But if you're telling yourself like, hey, I'm going to bust my ass and like try and, show up well to break into the exec ranks, and I'm going to trade off, fun for more work, I think that's fair. I see lots of people doing that. So I certainly for most of my career have kind of just been stepping on the gas. So I'm never shy about telling people that. Like I get a lot of energy from taking these sorts of risks and working hard. You don't have to be like me to be successful. I see lots of other successful execs, but I also think it's a choice, and I like to operate my career in this particular way. So I hope that helps. I'm trying to give you the honest scoop.
Thank you. That helps. Thank you.
Thanks for making me blush too. It's hard to blush to this dark skin.
All right, so we have Neha up next.
Hi, Nick. My name is Neha. I'm a junior studying CS and business at Berkeley. I see you also went to Berkeley for your MBA, so go Bears.
Go Bears.
My question is, what advice do you have to navigate workplace politics as a person of color?
Yeah, this is tough. I think that number one, you've got to protect your sanity. As a person of color, you're going to get additional scrutiny. Not just being a person of color, I mean, this is also gender related as well. So you're going to come into an environment which has been previously heavily dominated by white males. And it's changing now, but the reality is, that full change is going to take quite some time. So number one, my advice is protect your sanity. Like, you're going to get hit with, microaggressions or maybe not taken as seriously as you should be, and protect your sanity. Also, don't let this slide. I think when I was coming up, you kind of had to play this game where like you would code switch, or you try to fit in and change the way that you act in order to fit into this system. You don't have to do that anymore. And so my advice is, don't be afraid to bring, I'm not going to say your full self to work. That, I don't bring my full self to my grandma's house. That would be insane. So don't, sorry. bring your best self to work. Like whatever the attributes that and skills that you think would be the best fit for the environment that you work in, bring those to play. And then if you detect politics related to your race or gender, it's simply not tolerable nowadays. Like you could maybe get away with this shit like pre the entire Uber board, exec team being fired, but in today's world, it's not acceptable at all. So my advice is don't accept it. I think the other thing that I would also caution folks, like there is workplace politics, like separate from politics associated with race and gender. And this is just generally hard for everybody. So sometimes it can be difficult to tease those things apart. Like you will need to, as you advance in your career, figure out how to navigate politics of any organization. Because you will also be dealing with the additional frustration of race and gender, it will be hard to decouple things that are purely office politics from those other challenges. So don't accept it. Always try and push back if you think you're being unfairly attacked or categorized, but also know that like there will also just generally be politics, and you're going to have to deal with that frustration as well. And I know I'm not painting a super rosy picture for you guys, but but this is the truth. And you guys didn't bring me on this Q&A to lie to you. Like, so the truth is you will, as you advance your technical skills, also need to learn how to navigate the politics of a large organization. And as you do so, never accept any sort of racial or gender bias. If you see it, just stomp it out. Like now is the time and the environment to just stomp it out. Right?
For sure. Thank you so much.
No problem. Good luck.
Thanks.
So Nick, we have 1 minute left. We do have 2 questions from students. Do you have a few minutes or?
Yeah, I got a few minutes. Let's keep it going.
Okay, cool. So Raziel, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I just wanted to, I'll make mine quick. Nick, thank you very much. My name is Raziel, rising junior right now at Manhattan College in New York City. I just wanted to ask you a question. It seems like listening to your trajectory professionally and also even academically, it seems like you really searched and really like looked out for like really challenging things from MIT all the way working up to Microsoft. As an aspiring software engineer, do you believe that we should be just trying our best to like go after the most, difficult challenges that we can to kind of like sharpen ourselves? Do you believe that maybe, I guess in the end, it's just more subjective as far as your path? Like, should I be pursuing the most difficult challenges that I can to make myself better? That's the question I want to ask.
That's a question similar to work-life balance. It's a question only you can answer, because for me to pursue the path that you just described, and look, I'm not going to play the violin here. I've had a pretty good life, but I often don't tell people the things I traded off, right? So I lived across the country from my family for 15 years. Me and my wife is also somewhat of a workaholic. We don't have kids, right? So we'll probably have kids later, but we don't have them right now. Relationships, being able to invest in just friends networks that are separate from work. These are the trade-offs that you have to make. So for me, I was willing to make all of those trade-offs and get to where I'm at. Like I just naturally like this continuous challenge of all the other, I'll say hi to Tia, of all the other things that I could be doing with my life. I feel like, this was the best for me, and my family supported me and my parents supported this trade-off and understood my motivation. But I don't think that is necessarily the right path for everybody. And you have to be careful about how you trade these things off. You only have so much time and energy to invest. Just be it's up to you, right? If you think you're investing in the right areas, you're the only person who can make that call. So I won't pretend to be able to advise you on it, but for me, has worked out pretty well and got me into a spot that I feel pretty good about.
Thank you very much, Nick. I appreciate that.
No problem, man. Good luck.
All right. Last and final question, Titus.
Yes, thanks so much, Emily, for the great job. And thanks, Nick, for sharing those insightful words. It's been very, for my question, my name is Titus, and I'm a rising senior in electrical engineering from Texas Southern University. So my question today is looking at what is going on in the country and what is going on in the workforce. How much of emotional intelligence do we need to, capability do we need to have as upcoming, engineers, CS major and all those stuff. So,
yeah,
and I'll listen to that. Thanks so much.
Excellent question. Yeah, so this is a good thing, by the way. The days where you could be kind of an asshole engineer are long gone. All right. So, when I graduated, it was whoever could code the best and like bully each other's, like those people were, it would be unheard of today to see those people being placed into leadership positions. So in terms of emotional intelligence, you need to come to the workplace with a team first mindset. You need to check your ego at the door, and you need to think about personal growth, empathy. Like these are the tools that people use to lead in this generation. Like now, maybe this will change again someday, but like you guys are joining in a workplace now, and it's a workplace that will not tolerate the what is it, the 10x engineer, the engineer that has the ego, right? You've got to learn to be a part of a team. Building software systems and all the tools that we use to get our jobs done nowadays are all oriented around teamwork. GitHub, like you can't check into production without 5 other people looking at your code. And if you you're going to have to get used to those sort of interpersonal interactions at every step along the way. I was writing a document yesterday, had 8 simultaneous editors on it, right? So invest in and think about how you're going to leverage each other, how you can be the best possible teammate. That doesn't mean give up your personal goals. I'm not saying that. But just be aware that like one of the skills that people are looking for, or one of the skill sets people are looking for increasingly are these soft skills and empathy and so on and so forth. So great question, man.
All right. So unfortunately, all good things must come to an end. Thank you so much, Nick, for joining us today. I think our students got a lot out of today's session. Final question for you is, if folks want to stay in touch with you, what's the best way?
Hey, the easiest way, I know you guys can all connect to me on LinkedIn, but honestly, the easiest way is you just go on Twitter and like tweet something that we were on this call, and I'll follow you back. Here's my Twitter handle right there. Feel free to reach out. If you ever have any questions, hit me on Twitter. I'm going to try and I want to do more office hours like this, so maybe there'll be something in the future. But follow me there, and we'll figure it out. I'll probably announce something in the next couple of weeks.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Nick. And thank you so much to all the students. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the rest of your summer.
Thanks, y'all. Have a good one.